This is a very special episode of Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder, and I have Brooke Calder joining me for this episode. And we're going to be, I think the best way to put it is honoring one of my favorite Minneapolis records that I experienced during my time in
Thank you.
Minneapolis. It was released in July 2015. We actually met at the release show
That's true.
for Shadows and Sand by Glean. And full disclosure, then we were married for a bit, and now we're conducting this interview. I'm really glad that we're doing this because it's not just a personal favorite Minneapolis record of mine. It is that, but it's not just that, because part of the accounts of what it's doing on Bandcamp is it says it's dissecting the past while moving the listener to a place of reflection, hope, and change. I think that's an accurate description of what the record is doing. And I'm hopeful that we can grapple with what that means. And perhaps to begin with, what is your immediate response to that account of what the record's doing? Is that what you currently feel the record is doing?
Well, I should say, so I started working on this record in 2010. And as part of a processing tool for difficult childhood issues that I was trying to work through in therapy. And, many projects I had before, it was always like playing a persona or engaging metaphors to hide what the songs were really about. And I think just always hiding behind something, because as you know, and many listeners may not know, I came from a background which was extremely about showmanship and persona and stagecraft and all these things that, I was basically just taught that you don't bring your personal life into your work. It's just work, it's entertainment. I came from that kind of a background. And, for me, my therapist was like, why aren't you writing songs about this? And I thought, that's a good question. So, and I thought, well, maybe if I process, it can help other people process. And, we were discussing at that time music as therapy, and I started listening to Tears for Fears a lot. And, because they're an example, a great, wonderful example of how music can be used as a therapeutic tool. I think all musicians, I think we all hope, including you, that whatever you do resonates with someone out there or helps them, and that maybe they need a safe space that they can get into and just sort of do their own thinking, even if they're listening to someone else's real life story or a fiction or whatever it is. Hopefully it can help them process that. And I think when we wrote that description I think that was like 2015. I think when we wrote that description, that was our goal. And I can only hope and pray that we met that goal.
Yeah, thank you. So, on the back of that, let's quickly contextualize that a couple of the previous projects were Lollipop and Popping.
Yeah.
And I will, editing me, will give a little clip of those to give a sense of the difference. So there you were referring to there being to kind of playing with personas. So presently we can hear Lollipop. Which Lollipop song can we hear? Obviously, I'll
right now?
Yeah, which one would you like there to be to represent Lollipop, to give a sense of the contrast? So right now we can hear a little snippet from a track from the Lingerie record by Lollipop, the Lingerie reissue, and the track is called Glamorous Life. So, and this is you, and it's very, very...
Was.
This is your voice, so we can hear your voice.
Right.
And you were kind of in the character of Lolly. Yeah? And...
persona.
The persona, using the persona.
The David Bowie method.
Yeah, and I find it interesting. So we're going to make this radical transition to Glean. And I'm glad you referenced Lollipop and Popping to give a sense of quite how this record, how this project Glean fits into your musical career and contrasts with what you were doing before. Of course, there is a metaphor, though. You said that you've been using lots of metaphors before. Here, there is a metaphor of the Titanic, but it's being used in a very different way.
I think we talked about this in our real lives before, but I stopped writing the record because Rick McCollum, who I'd begun writing the record with, had gone back out on tour with the Afghan Whigs, so we got halted for like a year. And by the time he came back, it was the 100th anniversary of the Titanic sinking, and I, had been very, since my grandmother first told me about the Titanic, like quite enamored and a bit of a buff myself. I had found out that year that Constance Willard, who was 22 during the Titanic incident, she's from Minneapolis and lived here for a lot of her life. And even after she survived, she came home. But so partially, part of this record is really a triad of Constance's story of surviving the Titanic, and some metaphor for what was going on with my life. Like the record started out as me just processing through some grief and trying to use music as a therapy tool, and then when I learned about Constance and did some research on her, she actually wound up dying in a mental institution. So I felt like really, really bad for her. And I thought, well, someone should also write something to memorialize her, And then again, it fit someone else's, my other songwriters' parameters as well. So it just seemed like a natural thing to do, to try to pay respect to the Titanic.
So I have in my notes about the Titanic just here that it was constructed in Belfast, and then in April 1912, it set sail, of course, from Southampton here in England, on its maiden voyage, of course, towards New York City, and we all know what happened. All of those locations and Nicolette Mall, which Constance, I know from your Bandcamp, would walk on daily. So specifically
when
in
she came home,
Nicolette Mall, Constance, survivor of the sinking of the Titanic, would walk there daily. All of those locations, with perhaps the exception of Southampton, but you can correct me. I'm not sure. Sonically on the record. Could you explain how?
Yes. So Holly Lester, who's like Holly Lester, the DJ over there in the UK. Holly Lester went and recorded ambient noise from the dock that the Titanic was built on in Belfast, because she happened to be going to Belfast. So she captured that for us. And so all the songs on both the live record and Shadows and Sand are built on Holly's ambient samples from Belfast. And then the cellist in the band was from Eastbourne, and so we had another friend go to Eastbourne and record the sea, like ocean sounds on the beach from there. And so like when you hear those ocean waves in both the live, because we basically just used the same long 30+ minute running sample, which starts with Holly's samples in Belfast and then moves to Eastbourne, to where the cellist, came from. And then New York, the pier where the Titanic should have arrived. And then in Angels Are Everywhere, that's samples from Nicolette Mall that I took on my phone. Just walking.
And also even the man who is addressed in the song was originally seen on Nicolette Mall.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So in the narrative of the song, you're on a bus, you have sunglasses on.
There was just a guy, a very businessy looking guy, who kept staring at me through the bus window and like just would not stop staring at me. And I had sunglasses on, and it was just so bizarre because I could never figure out why. It wasn't anyone I knew. I must have reminded him of someone, I think. And he started crying. He started just like tearing up. Not like bawling, but like tearing up. And I mean, I don't know why, but that image just stayed with me. It was so odd. It felt like I should get off the bus and talk to him, but like it's someone I don't know. He probably thought I was someone else, and I had to get to work, so I couldn't quite, engage him. Like, it's another human being obviously in pain. If I hadn't had to be to work, I would have probably stopped to talk to him.
Another human being in pain, yeah. And there's some kind of encounter here. He is observing and responding to you in some kind of way. You were just saying that, part of you at least wanted to then, have a deeper encounter with this person. Human connection is, I think, a really key thing to think about in relation to this Glean record. And I love that particular encounter spawned this song. How did that encounter end up spawning a song called Angels Are Everywhere? What's the relationship between that idea and that encounter?
Well, I literally went to work, and the place where I was working at the time, there was a piano in one of the rooms upstairs that we were allowed to play if we wanted to. And I was so haunted by like this guy continually staring at me and then tearing up that I just like went upstairs on my break and I started playing like a passage, and I'm not a great pianist, as you know. It's not like I'm wonderful, but I just like found the right melody for how I was, the right sounds for how I was feeling. And just sort of sat there and tried to find piano sounds that felt the way I felt. And I had written like a rough piano demo, like literally on my break in like half an hour. And I already had the chorus.
Inspired by that encounter.
Yeah, same day. I already had the chorus, and the verses really wrote themselves because all I did was just like write what had happened. So, I mean, I think I wrote that song in a span of 3 days, and I had the basic melody and really gross rough pianos that I took to Jordan Headland, who really made something of it.
The keys.
And then I took it after I took it to Jordan. I took it to Rick when he came home from tour. And
Brooke Calder, who came home from tour with the Afghan Wigs. So we made a reference to him earlier, but that's a pretty major thing, isn't it? That on this record we have Brooke Calder from the Afghan Wigs on guitar.
I just think of Rick like as my friend. I mean, I don't know. I love the Afghan Wigs as a young lady, and certainly I admired, the honesty in their records, and I think that's like why I thought of Rick, because also in addition to the Afghan Wigs, he has the Moon Man discs. I think I borrowed. Did I ever borrow you one of those?
Yeah, I've enjoyed their music. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, like I really liked Moon Man as well, and he just had the right guitar tone to express grief with. I mean, it was like, listen to any of those Afghan Wigs records and you just, you know what I mean? It's just like, oh, it's so heartbreaking to listen to him play.
Yes, absolutely.
It's so devastating. He's devastating.
So it's definitely there. When Rick plays guitar, perhaps especially, we can hear it right now on the record. I'll pick out a bit where the guitar is very prominent. It is expressive of grief. You refer to the honesty of the Afghan Wigs. There's an authenticity to the emotional expression in this guitar playing.
I think if you listen to the album Gentleman, there's a level of disgust with himself that Greg is expressing, and you can hear that same disgust being played, in some of those guitar licks, and it's just really, I don't know how to explain it. Really like disturbing. Disturbing. Yes.
Already, I feel that there's a thread. There's an analogy between the guy looking at you when you're on the bus and the music, the Afghan Wigs music that you've just been describing, and the constant in those two, the thing that unites
pain.
Is pain, exactly, yeah, and.
That's something all of us human beings go through, isn't it, at some point, no matter who you are.
Which is, again,
our common denominator.
Yeah, and that's why I really wanted to speak about this record with you, because I feel that the way in which it just, encounters and gives voice to pain with some expectation and hope that there might be some kind of transformation, some good might come of this. There is that, but there's also just the need to, for oneself and for others. This is the interesting intersection, I think. Something significant, I feel, something very significant occurs in this record and in other music which takes on the mantle, perhaps, of allowing pain to be expressed, especially with the therapeutic aim that you had. So on my table just here, I have Primal Scream.
One of my favorite books ever.
Yeah, I actually have Double Trouble. I've got Primal Scream and the new Primal Scream.
Well done, Simon Calder.
Why is this one of your favorite books ever? And why am I holding it up in this interview with you?
Well, several reasons. The first being that it is a really important book that looks at vocalizing anger, hurt, fear, using the voice as a tool for therapy. And, that's the other thing is in 2010, when I first started working on this record, I mean, that's what I was reading. And, we've talked about this before, but just for the viewer, I, again, had been going through some things and going to therapy, and, my therapist was like, why aren't you writing songs about this stuff? And I was like, no, I don't think so.
The therapist recommended using songwriting and performance as a form of therapy.
Yeah, and I was like, that's a really good one. We don't do that in entertainment. Right, we're here to take people away from their problems. Nope.
Right. Yeah, and
that was my reaction, was like, I like that. Maybe in the 70s, but then I thought about it, and I really thought about, like I said, Tears for Fears. And John Lennon actually went through scream therapy.
Yep. Primal Scream
book. Yep. And Robert Smith of The Cure did primal scream therapy as well, because it did help so many creative people, particularly vocalists and singers and other musicians. I thought, well, I better read that. So I started reading it, and it's a long read. I mean, it took probably a year of on and off reading. Yeah.
Visual aid.
That.
It's not short.
That. Yeah, it really took a while to get through, and I had to do it in spurts because the parts of it were so intense, as you know, that it was like, oh my God, I can't read anymore right now. It's so much, but you get through it, and so honestly, reading that book and then listening to I had some Tears for Fears in my collection, but I went and got everything on cassette that I could find at Cheapo, to find the material and the work that I missed. And I just sat there and laid on the floor for most of while Rick was on tour.
So you're midway through working on the Glean record, Rick's on tour, and then you dive deep into Tears for Fears.
Well, no, we had written maybe a fourth of the record, half of which didn't survive and make it onto the actual record because I went through such an epiphany while he was gone.
Can you say a little bit more about the epiphany?
The only person I could think of who might be down for actually sitting with me in some grief and listening to me, that I wouldn't be scared, if I burst into tears while I was trying to vocalize something, or, he was the only person I thought who might really be able to withstand me, breaking down emotionally while songwriting and working on these things.
Rick?
Yeah. I didn't know. I mean, I had worked with so many other musicians and so many other contexts, and I think so many people that I worked with would just think I was completely a nutcase, for having these kinds of feelings while working on songs like these. But I mean, this is where the art actually comes from. It comes from states of wonder or love or desire or horrible things happening. So much art comes from such pain. Or such joy, or such, things that really motivate the songwriter. I mean, but a lot of the people I worked with were just company people.
Yeah,
you know,
very professional.
Professional. Yeah, people like Grammy Award winning people who like did this as a living, and like I wasn't interested anymore in aiming for that. I was interested in like excuse me.
Okay.
I was interested in recovering from my life.
Absolutely. And we know that music can do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, that's... So I'm so glad that you made that commitment to yourself, to your recovery, and that you decided to do so through music, both for your own well-being and also because it really is, I think, for Tears for Fears too, a courageous thing. And that's what really struck me
Yeah.
at the
Yes.
release show. When you were performing at the release show, I could feel the power of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I think too, though, like, you know, they kind of arrived I think Roland started songwriting probably in the late 70s, very early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think during that time, music had not become so focused on commercial aspects. I think like it left over from the 70s. You know, in the 70s, music was very much about these kinds of things.
A specific lyric in the song, in the John Lennon song Mother, that seemed to be suffused in Yanov to me is Father, I needed you, you need me. And then there's all kinds of lyrics which very directly, very many of the lyrics in the Hurting record by
the Tears for Fears,
totally suffused in ideas from the Primal Scream book. So, for example, in Pale Shelter, you don't give me love, you give me pale shelter. So again, we have the parent who is not giving the child the love that they need. And this is a key aspect of Yanov's theory. Then the child cries, of course, because of the unmet need. And correct me if I'm kind of summarizing Yanov's theory differently than you understand that, but if the grown-up child, you know, if the adult is given a container within which they can re-experience that same pain of the child and complete the process, and importantly cry, tears are crucial, theory, and realize I didn't receive the love that I am worthy of receiving. So with the combination of that recognition, I am worthy of love, and I'm experiencing pain because I wasn't given the love that I am worthy of, combined with being back in that same emotional state and crying. That is the key, according to this theory, to healing.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, I think that's the basis of Yanov. I think the things that people get set up for in life happen when they're babies and children and during imperative times of development. I mean, so much of what gets called mental illness rather than like something else that maybe it should be more appropriately called. I think so much of what happens, you know, trauma and so forth, a lot of that happens in very early stages or childhood. So, and a lot of that doesn't get resolved because it stays with you for your whole life. It doesn't ever go away. So you just have to find, you know, I think I was really with that record in particular. And I think what a lot of people and musicians who are trying to express similar things, I think what we figure out is that crap, this isn't going to go away. These things are going to be with us for the rest of our lives. You know, how does one cope with that? How can one deal with that? And I think for creative types and musical types, music is a way to do that. And like I said, it's quite odd. My therapist was correct. It's quite odd that I hadn't thought of adding that as a way of doing it, but
well, it involves vulnerability. There's all kinds of reasons it works against it's outside of the past.
It's not glamorous at all.
It's
all a bunch of deep stuff with hard crying and spoiled mascara, and not in the cool Courtney Love Kinder Horror way.
Right. One could be accused of being selfish, making it all about oneself. It's culturally not encouraged, commercially not encouraged. It involves vulnerability and bravery to show up in that way. So there's all kinds of reasons. And I find, so yeah, I've been reading this book called The New Primal Scream.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
What
do you think?
It's quite interesting.
What are the differences thus far?
So for the rest of the interview, we'll dip into some moments of this book, sometimes as a way into recognizing something that's obviously key for one of the songs. For example, there's a whole chapter called The Role of Weeping in Psychotherapy. And so we're going to be using that chapter as a way into Tears Are Holy. And of course, there is a Glean song, The Scream. There are aspects of this, the new Primal Scream book that are going to help us honor what the record is doing, and that secondly, I think, remain really important. There are some other aspects of it. This was written, so on the other hand, this comes out in 1991, and by this point, Janov is quite critical of some people who have taken ideas from the original book, and he thinks in a kind of unscientific, unauthorized way are doing all kinds of wrong things. And so he suddenly becomes a lot more hardline with like, this is a rigorous scientific method. I have all the data to show why it works. I've solved the mind-body dualism problem. This is the first truly scientific form of therapy that there is. There's all these charlatans who are using my ideas. And as this new component, becomes more prominent, I feel that there are aspects of like the evolved theory that I'm less attracted to, and the reason why I'm hoping that we're able to do a little bit of kind of cross comparison of what's happening in Janov's theory and what's happening in your record is there's no way in which this evolved, official account of what primal scream therapy is would consistently condone everything that's happening in the record, but I prefer the record to the theory. Okay, so
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, of course.
So and for me, like philosophically, all of what I'm doing at the moment with these new Back to the City interviews and the books that I'm working on, I feel that music, the kernel, the central kernel really is that music does facilitate healing, is a container within which healing can occur.